Hello, 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 and welcome to Sir Jaxxy Plays MMOs. I'm Sir Jaxxy, and this video is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do. This video is aimed and geared for those of you wanting to take and start into streaming. Or maybe you're in streaming and just looking to change the software you use to broadcast. If that's not you, then this video might be one you want to pass on. Now, you might be asking, why are you doing this video on streaming software? Well, the answer is I'm getting back into streaming. After the first of the year, I will have a schedule set up. I'm going to be doing some streaming during December to see how things go and see what network I'm going to be streaming on. Haven't decided if it's going to be Twitch permanently or if it's going to be Hitbox, or Steam is now doing streaming. So I got a few options there that I have to look at. I'm going to be playing with those during the month of December. But after December, after the first of the year, I'm going to have a permanent schedule. And in such, I wanted to look at the three main software programs out there for broadcasting. Those being FFsplit, OBS, and XSplit. Now, OBS, or Open Broadcast Software, I think most people are familiar with, and most of you probably have heard of XSplit at one time or another. FFsplit is one of the more obscure ones. However, it's one of the oldest ones. It's been around for some time now. In fact, it was the first software that I started streaming with, back 2.5, 3 years now, maybe even longer. And then I moved over to OBS because, well, OBS just seemed to be a little bit more feature-rich. When I went back to FFsplit, I was really surprised at the complete turnaround and change that they have made with the software and the features they've added. It's really quite nice for a free program. Now again, both FFsplit and OBS are just free programs. They're open source. XSplit has two different softwares for broadcasting, those being Broadcaster, which is the more feature-rich one, and Gamecaster. Gamecaster is very easy to set up and very easy to run, but it's not quite as feature-rich. But it does have one thing I really love, and I really wish it was in Broadcaster, and that is the ability to overlay your text chat right onto your stream. Do a game overlay. That way you don't have to be running another monitor to make sure you're streaming and to watch your chat. Very nice feature. I'm hoping that they implement it into Broadcaster here in the future. However, beyond that, the main thing I wanted to look at was performance, and the performance hit that my system would take while streaming / recording, because I did stream and record the stream at the same time, as well as what type of performance I would take in my frame rates. Now, years ago, I used XSplit Broadcaster. I had a 3-month license. And I was very disappointed with it because it was extremely resource heavy. It was it used up more of my CPU than my game did. It made for me to have to turn my game settings down in order to maintain a decent frame rate. Well, recently they came out with a version 2 of XSplit, and they added this Gamecaster, so I want to try them out. Now, all of my testing was done using using Fraps as my benchmarker. And because of that, I had to run the games in region or window mode rather than in game mode or game catcher mode, whatever they want to call it. So that it was even across the board, and I did that so that I could continue running Fraps to benchmark things. Unfortunately, I could not benchmark Gamecaster, and that was because no matter what I did, it just would not let me run Fraps at the same time as I was running it. And I couldn't find any other. I tried Action, which also has a benchmarking utility, and that won't work with Gamecasters. I tested 2 games. I tested Rift and I tested Aura Kingdom. I did that because Rift is a game that is very poorly optimized. I love the game dearly, but it's extremely poorly optimized, as those of you who play it know. So I wanted a game that was going to take and be a challenge to the software, and then I wanted a game that would be a breeze. Or a Kingdom I easily run on my system, you know, taking and running it at a rate of, try to think, at over 100 FPS. Frames per second. So that's why I chose those two programs to take and use. Now, my system is an older system. I will be, very blunt about that. I'm running an old AMD Phenom for my processor. It's the 1090T processor. It was at the time one of the top of the line AMD processors for the for Phenom 2 line. So it's not, it's still a pretty decent processor. It is a 6-core processor. I got 8 gigabytes of memory I'm running, and my GPU I think it's great, but it is getting older. It's getting a little long in tooth, and that is a XFX Radeon HD 6950. So with the specs out of the way, let's jump right into what I got for performance. Now in Rift, I recorded both inside of Meridian and just outside of Meridian while I killed a couple of boars. Now, on FFsplit, my minimum FPS was 17, my max was 70, and my average was 41.13 before streaming or recording. Once I turned on the FFsplit, and keep in mind, I was running all of these programs in the background, well, one at a time, not all at once, but I was running the program in the background without when I wasn't streaming, so that I could just switch right into streaming. So there was a little bit of performance there. I was also running a Firefox window with one tab open to monitor my stream, and I was also running Fraps because I was using that for my benchmark. Now, during streaming, and on all of these I streamed and recorded, you can see the recording playing. During streaming / recording, I was getting a minimum of 8 FPS, maximum of 48, with an average of 25.93. So that meant I had an average, on my average frame rate, I lost 15.2 frames per second during streaming. With OBS, I also got 17 frames per minute for my minimum, which is kind of odd because honestly, I got 17 frames per second minimum for all of these, for OBS, FFsplit, XSplit Broadcaster Free, and XSplit Broadcaster Premiere. So that kind of is a little bit funny to me, but that's the way it worked out. Now, also, just to quickly mention, with Broadcaster, I ran both the free app, the free version, as well as the Premiere license. And I got the Premiere license from Freedom Network. I'd like to thank them. I got a 7-day trial. Well, not trial. It was a full version of the Premiere license for 7 days use. So I use that to test this out. Now, getting back to OBS, we had a minimum of 17, as I said. Maximum frames per second was 66. My average frames per second were 40.99 prior to streaming. During streaming, my minimum FPS was 11, which was considerably higher than, FFsplit, and I'll mention now it was also higher than both Broadcaster Free and Broadcaster Premiere. My maximum FPS was 53. that also was higher than any of the other programs. My average was 29.71, which again was higher than any of the programs. So OBS actually did a higher average frame rate and higher frame rates per second than any of the other programs. And my frame rate average, the average loss or the loss of my compared to my average frame rate was 11.28 frames per second, which was the lowest out of all of the four programs. So OBS obviously was the clear winner as far as frame rate, as far as average frame rates went. Now, XSplit Broadcaster Free was 17 frames per minute minimum, 68 frames per minute maximum, and 41.82 frames per second average before streaming, which actually I'm wrong. That is high. No, that's, yeah. That one actually got the highest frame rate running in the background. But once I started streaming, my minimum frame rate was 9, my maximum frame rate was 51, and my average FPS during streaming was 27.56, which was about 2 FPS lower than OBS. Not a huge difference, and honestly, the way Rift plays, it's not even a big enough difference to make, to cause a notice or to actually be able to see a big change or difference. Now, my average frame loss, though, with Broadcaster Free was actually 14.26, which was 3 frames more. My frame rate loss was 3 frames more than OBS. There again, with Rift, that's not a big enough difference to make, to even really notice. Now with Broadcaster Premiere, my minimum was 17 again. My maximum was 69. This is before streaming. And my average frame rate prior to streaming, but while running the software in the background, was 40.82. Now, once I started streaming, my minimum frame rate was 10, which was only 1 frame below what OBS was. However, my maximum frame rate was only 48, which was actually 5 frames and below what OBS's maximum was. And when you start hitting 5 frame rates difference, then you can actually start to see some minor difference within the game. My average frame rate while streaming with XSplit Broadcaster was 28.97, which really surprised me because it was actually a frame and a half more than what XSplit Broadcaster Free gave me. It was also less than a frame under what OBS gave me. So not much of a difference at all there. And in fact, my average frame rate loss was 11.85. That's less than 1 frame less than what OBS gave me. Now, keep in mind you do have to pay for the Premiere license. They've just recently started allowing monthly payments. It used to be that you had to buy a 3-month license right up front. And the monthly license, I believe, is right around $9. I think it's like $8.95 or something like that per month. So it's not a whole lot, but there is a cash outlay there. And of course, if you buy the 3, 6, or yearly license, then you're not paying as much per month. They do give you a discount. Now, to keep this video a little, not getting too long, let's move on to Aura Kingdom. FFsplit with Aura Kingdom, my minimum frames per second while not streaming, before streaming, was 33. My maximum was 121. And this is kind of odd again because my maximum frame rate was 121 across the board. And I know why that is, though, because with Aura Kingdom, you have to set your frame rate. You have to lock your frame rate at 1. You can either lock it at 30, 60, or 121. So I could have been getting a higher FPS on the max side than that, but because it's locked at 121, that's where everything hit. It's just the nature of the game. And it really doesn't affect me outside of anything because I'm running a 60 hertz monitor, so I really can't see much more than 60 frames per second anyway. But I didn't want to limit it to 60 frames because of the testing. I wanted to see if any of these dropped off below that. So my average with FFsplit before streaming was 94.7 frames per second. With streaming, once I started streaming, and again, I was also recording, FFsplit, I was getting 21 frames per second minimum, 97 maximum, an average of 64.39 frames per second while I was streaming. Now, what that works out to being is actually a very disappointing 30.31 frames per second loss. Now, granted, 64 frames a second is perfectly adequate to run a game and to stream a game, but I was disappointed to see that there was actually such a large loss compared to the other software, as you'll see here. OBS before streaming, I was getting 54 minimum, 121 max, 104.4 average. During streaming, I was getting 41 minimum, as opposed to FFsplit's 21. I was hitting 115 maximum, again, as opposed to 97 for FFsplit. And my average was 79.42. That's a whole 15 frames more than what I was getting in FFsplit for my average frame rate during streaming. And my average frame rate loss was only 24.62. which I found to be really impressive considering that FFsplit was giving me a 30.31. But the clear winner in this particular game was the free version of Broadcaster. With XSplit Broadcaster, I was getting a minimum of 36 frames per second, which was in fact lower than, OBS's 54. Was getting the 121, and I averaged out at 92.37 frames per second. Now, yes, that's considerably lower than what FFsplit gave me while I was recording. I mean, before I was recording, OBS gave me 104.4. So OBS gave me about 12 frames per second more running in the background while I wasn't streaming than what XSplit Broadcaster Free gave me. But when I started streaming, the minimum frame rate I was getting with Broadcaster Free was 44 frames per second, which was 3 higher than OBS. The maximum frame rate I got was 104, which during streaming, that's ridiculous on this game. I mean, OBS was giving me 115, but those are both, once you hit up over 100 frames per second in a game like Aura Kingdom, you're not going to see anything different. So it's really, OBS did better, but it really doesn't matter at that point. Broadcaster pulled its own weight. My average with Broadcaster was 71.93, which was about 8 frames less than what I was getting with OBS, but my total frame loss average, though, was only 20.44. So I actually only lost 4 frames per second less, which is a good thing, than what OBS did have for a loss. And then for XSplit Broadcaster Premiere, I was getting 68 frames per second minimum. Again, the 121 max. My average was 98.41. before streaming. Once I started streaming, my minimum was 43, which was 1 frame less than what the free version gave me, and 2 frames less than what OBS was giving me. I hit 113 for my maximum frame rate with Broadcaster Premiere, which was 11 frames higher than what the free version was giving me, and only 2 frames less than what OBS gave me. Again, though, once you get over 100 frames per second in a game like Aura Kingdom, you're not going to be able to see a difference. And my average with XSplit Broadcaster Premiere was 73.58 frames per second, which again was 2 frames per second above what the free version gave me, and roughly 6 seconds or so less than what less than what OBS was giving me. And finally, my frame rate loss on the average frame rate was 24.83, which was 4 frames more than what the free version gave me for some reason. I don't understand that or why, but it was also pretty much the exact same output that OBS gave me. OBS had a 24.62 loss. This had 24.83 loss, so you're looking at about a 0.2 difference in the frame rates on the loss. So, having bored you with all those numbers, what's my conclusion? Here it is. And I'm going to eat a little bit of crow here because of all of my years taking saying XSplit was resource intensive. The new XSplit version 2 really, really impressed me. I was amazed by it. Yes, in some cases, OBS came out ahead. And honestly, if you have no money to spend and you need a free version, what I recommend doing is getting the free version of XSplit Broadcaster or Gamecaster, or both, and getting OBS. Pick the game that you're going to be streaming on a regular basis. Load up Fraps. You can't load up Fraps with Gamecaster, but you can watch your FPS and CPU usage. You can do a game overlay for that. Run the games in windowed or region mode, because that will take and give you the ability to continue running Fraps as a benchmarker. And benchmark the games. See which one works better for you. But if you can afford to spend $9 a month, get XSplit. Bottom line. And I don't say that lightly because I have had issues with XSplit in the past, but right now I can fully, wholeheartedly endorse them and say that if you can afford the $9 a month to stream, get XSplit. Take and try out Gamecaster, try out Broadcaster, see which one suits you best. You get both of them with the Premiere license for about $9 a month. And honestly, I don't think you can go wrong. They're so feature-rich between Broadcaster and Gamecaster. Gamecaster has a couple of overlays. Like I said, they've got the chat overlay, the Twitch chat overlay, which I think is fantastic. But I'm going to probably be streaming with Hitbox or Steam along the way, so that doesn't help me that much. But Broadcaster has so many features, and so many more features than what OBS does. For a couple of frames per second more hit, I'm willing to take it at this point. And I honestly think if you look at it and you can afford it, you should be too. So that's all I have to say on that. I hope you liked this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be having some Rift videos coming along, Aura Kingdom videos. I'm trying out a couple of different a couple different MMOs that I'm going to be working on and possibly put out videos for. So hit subscribe so that you know when the next video comes out. Also, if you like videos like this that are more educational along the streaming or YouTube end of things, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try and make them more often, you know, maybe once a month or, you know, a couple of months. I'm not going to take over the channel with them or anything like that, don't worry. But if you do like them, let me know down in the comments, and I'll go ahead and I'll share more of what software I use, what equipment I use, how I do things. Until next time, this is Sir Jaxxy fading out.